same car, irrespective of whether it is the Prime Minister's vehicle or President Putin's vehicle, towards 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, will also send a few signals.
So, look, this was an annual visit that used to happen. The Indian Prime Minister went there 1 year. The Russian President would come here 1 year. It just hasn't happened for the last 4 years because of the Ukraine war. And the second thing is, it was very curious. I was talking to air traffic control earlier today. Even the chief air traffic controller had not been told what time the plane would be landing. So there were a lot of security concerns that the Russians had flying over neutral, even over neutral airspace. I believe that this particular flight path has actually gone through military flight routes, not through the civil flight routes. And I don't know how the final coordination was done with the ATC and when the flight plan was given, because till this morning, Delhi ATC sure didn't know what time the plane was going to land.
They kept it very guarded. President Putin is just about to step out. Abhijit and Mitra, just staying with the pictures. There you go, thanking the captain of the ship as he steps out. And President Putin is stepping down. He's coming down, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has walked right up there to the base of those steps to receive President Vladimir Putin. There you go, as he steps down, walks up 10 steps, and there you will see Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking towards him. The big handshake and the big embrace. Lots of smiles between the two leaders. This is the long camera as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is walking slowly towards the red carpet. They meet halfway on the red carpet. Big warm embrace between the two leaders. Lots of smiles, lots of conversations. Clearly, both of them can converse in English, and that's what's happened. A short conversation in English as both of them walk together. The formal introductions to the delegates and the reception party, that's what's going on at this point, as all the members of the PMO, the External Affairs Ministry, the joint delegation, both sides, the Russian, Indo-Russian counterparts, all of them stand there. That's the welcoming party that's being introduced, and then a handshake and greeting that's happening. And thereafter, this will be interesting to see. Which way do they move? Do they go in separate vehicles towards 7 Lok Kalyan Marg? They're all standing there for a photo op. Clearly, President Putin in good spirits, all smiles. The security, as Abhijit Iyer Mitra had said, they've kept all the details very guarded. There is a welcome dance and a performance that's being made. 5 or 6 dancers performing traditional Indian classical dance form. And this looks like Bharatanatyam. And so the performance there, as both leaders pause on the tarmac to watch this. They watch, they applaud the performers for their effort, and that's the white vehicle. Now we'll have to see if they're all leaving together. We'll try and go across to those pictures and see if the leaders are departing together in the same vehicle. That means then the conversations, the broad contours of the conversation would have already begun. Yes, they are stepping in together. They are stepping in together. They are going together. There you go. The import of this is important. This looks like the president's vehicle. The president's vehicle in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also seated. The president sitting right behind the chauffeur, the driver's side, and Prime Minister sitting to the president's left. And the two leaders are already conversing. The SPG, the Russian security protocol, all of them sitting there. There are pictures that are being taken of the two leaders, and we'll have those pictures also being released in a bit. But Shashankji is with us. This is significant. After Tianjin, the second time the two leaders are traveling in the same vehicle. This is very rare. Shashankji, can you hear me?
I can hear you. So there is a very time constraint is there. They have to discuss. There's so many issues of great importance for bilateral relations and for the global situation as it is evolving, and issues of war and peace, that I think it's important that they should discuss this in the cars in a safe environment and take every opportunity to express their thoughts to each other.
But this is quite rare. This doesn't happen often. Surya Jayanti, Nikita Menkovich with us. Nikita Menkovich, this will be important. The Russians will be watching this. There is a show of fist and then, of course, something symbolic. There is a conversation that's happening. We can see the Prime Minister quite animated. But this is important. President Putin doesn't do this often with many leaders. Nikita.
This meeting is really important for both countries. For a long time, we had been main partners as Soviet Union and India. Now we're coming back to that level of relationship. Of course, for my honor opinion, not the more important what two leaders are showing now, but what they are going to discuss. But the thing with you demonstrate us that nothing spoils this meeting and this dialogue between our two countries. It shows that both Putin and Modi demonstrate confidential and respect for each other. It is a good base for dialogue and for future partnership in economy, in defense, and military projects. I hope that also IT, science, and other fields will be a topic of our dialogue and next.
I'm just going to interrupt you because we're getting pictures from Arun Dhanta's camera. Arun, you're just at the point where the two leaders are departing in the same car, same vehicle together. So similar to Tianjin, it's a white color vehicle that should come your way any moment now. Arun, talk us through what you see.
That's right, Anand. You can see the convoy, the first car of the convoy is coming out. In fact, this is the protocol car that you see. The gate is open. This is the Palam Technical Airport, and you can see now there's a glittering vehicle. This is also a protocol vehicle coming from inside the Palam Technical Airport. We just saw, in fact, we're seeing those deferred visuals of inside the airport, and now you can see that one after the other, these protocol cars are coming, and any moment on this camera,
it'll be a white vehicle. It'll be a white colored vehicle.
Of course, this is the entire convoy. This is the entire convoy. Now, Anand, you can see all these vehicles now coming out from the Palam Technical Airport. You can see these visuals on your screen as we've been discussing.
There you go. That's the white vehicle.
11-kilometer journey from here to 7 LKM, and it will not take more than 15 minutes for this entire convoy to reach at Prime Minister Modi's residence. You can see this entire entourage moving away from the Palam Technical Airport as we were witnessing the visuals of the inside, the welcome dance, the traditional dance there.
And so the cavalcade has left you, and we saw a little bit of a freeze in the pictures, the live pictures, because of the jammers that are in place. Huge amount of security, viewers, that have been put in place for President Putin's visit. And this is again breaking protocol. But Nikita Menkovich saying, I'm going to focus, we need to focus on what they will discuss. But the conversation has already begun. Surya Jayanti, will the White House also be watching? Will Europe leaders there also be watching the intensity of the conversation, the bonhomie between the leaders, the gestures that are extended? All this is also subtle messaging somewhere. Or would everybody look at, say, all right, this is optics. Let's look at the brass tacks. Let's look at what's being signed, what's being agreed on.
I think it is always easy to read a lot into the optics. They are an indication of a warm relationship and therefore important. I think Washington is probably going to ignore most of the optics, however, and wait to hear what the substance is. The main issue for Washington here is that Russia has made itself something of an international pariah by invading Ukraine, and as a consequence has faced strong sanctions over the last approaching 4 years. And therefore, what Putin needs out of this visit is a great deal. And I think there is a considerable power imbalance at the moment between Russia and India. Russia needs India much more than India needs Russia. And that's why you see President Putin really making an effort to show respect and show honor and project those diplomatic cues that you were just speaking about. Because Russia finds itself in a difficult position. One, it remains a mostly international pariah, but two, indications are that its economy is in recession, its budget is usually over 33% reliant on oil and gas revenue, and although its export numbers have not actually dropped, its revenue numbers are down 34% this year. It needs India. And so it has come to pay homage, and to some extent, it's come to beg. And so I think this is a great opportunity for India to secure some very solid economic benefits from the relationship.
Farwa Amir, I know you're pressed for time. Quick word. Farwa Amir has left. Just quick word from Siddhant, who's at 7 Lok Kalyan mark. The cavalcade is headed his way. In exactly about 10 minutes, they should be there. Siddhant, the import of this, many experts believe Russia needs India more at this point than the other way around. What is Bharat's approach going to be? You've been speaking to a lot of people. What's being worked in terms of behind the scenes? What's the focus on?
Well, the focus will be mainly on the bilateral issues, Anand. The biggest concern for the Indian government is the trade deficit. In fact, Russian side also acknowledges this concern. In fact, the business forums from India and Russia have been meeting from last 24 hours to find out plan to reduce this trade deficit. Now, India also wants the buyer-seller relationship as far as fertilizer exports from Russia is concerned to go beyond the buyer-seller relationship. That is also something which is on the agenda. The most important agreement, Anand, is going to be the mobility pact, which both India and Russia are going to sign during this visit of President Putin. Both sides have been working from last 1 year to get this agreement finalized, and now we've been told that agreement has been finalized, and it will be signed tomorrow in presence of the two leaders. So now young Indian talented skilled professionals will be going to Russia to work. So this is something very new introduced in this relationship, and this is one big takeaway perhaps which we could expect in the official document tomorrow. So as you rightly said, Anand, in 10 minutes from now, Prime Minister Modi and President Putin will be reaching 7 Lok Kalyan mark. Also, Anand, there needs to be a new word coined for this car diplomacy, because each time around these two leaders meet, they also do car diplomacy. They did car diplomacy in Tianjin. Now, for the second time, they are doing car diplomacy. Nobody knows what they're going to talk.
I don't think there is any car diplomacy here. But if I may pinch a word from the times of yore from Indian cinema, this is a Jai Viru on the same bike, and it's two friends trying to get a ride together and get some conversations in. This time, it's not a motorbike, but it's a car, and it's a phenomenal gesture to show that irrespective of the ebbs and the flows, and also the highs and the troughs, peaks and the troughs, their equations will not change, and they will continue to partner with each other and maintain this friendship. That respect is something that needs to be underlined, and the gesture, the Prime Minister going back and sitting in that car, it's the Prime Minister of the country. There is no ego there, saying that, all right, you're the visitor, it's your security vehicle, but I will sit there, let's break protocol, it doesn't matter. And I think somewhere this half an hour, 40-minute wait is also important, because the Prime Minister understanding the import of President Putin, waiting for him in Tianjin on the sidelines of the SCO when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was held up, and President Putin's cavalcade waited for a whole 10 minutes before Prime Minister boarded the Orasanat there. Let's try and go back to Shashankji and try and understand. Do you agree with Surya Jayanti when she says that this time around President Putin and Russia require Bharat more than the other way around?
I think we should not really look at it from this angle. I'm quite sure that the scholars in the West would try to see who is getting what from the other side and who can put more pressure on the other side. I think this is a relationship of mutual trust, friendship. And what we are trying to do is to move it from the buyer-seller relationship to a relationship of joint development and joint R&D. And I think technology transfer wherever it is possible. So I think there are so many more issues which are there. And above everything else, there is our trade deficit, which is very, very huge. So how do we take care of it? I mean, we can't simply say that, all right, we'll pay you in renminbi or in UAE currency. Therefore, we have to find some way out so that the rupee ruble trade can be carried out. And if you remember, at a time when the Russians were going through a very difficult time, then India agreed to have the rupee ruble trade at a rate which was very favorable to Russia at that time, not the international rate, but I think at the rate which the Russians wanted, more or less at that level. So it's a question of mutual trust. I think it's not a question of who can get what from the other side.
It's about I help you, you help me. Viewers, this labor mobility or people mobility is a huge opportunity because Russia is quite far advanced in terms of technology, in terms of medicine, in terms of medical advancements, research and development, etc. As you touch down in Moscow, the airport is not so impressive, but the moment you exit the airport, it's beautiful. And Moscow is a beautiful city. I've been there. And, they may be very strict, but they are always very, very friendly. They break into a smile the moment you say that you're from Bharat. And they have a few songs and a few representative references, which almost every other Russian would be able to tell you. You can figure your way out. But thing is that we don't look eastward. We don't go there. Largely, the traffic has been westward. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, will that change now? Is that possible? And from tourism itself, can there be more to gain for Bharat?
We've seen a change in Russian attitudes ever since the war in Ukraine started. I want to remind you, Russia is no longer the Russia it globalized long back. It's no longer what Indians remember of Raj Kapoor songs being sung and things like that. In fact, till the invasion of Ukraine, Russia TV was particularly hostile to India. They used to carry Pakistani propaganda throughout. They used to interview Kashmiri separatists. They used to take their coverage of India was virtually indistinguishable from Al Jazeera. And we know that was pretty much controlled from the Kremlin itself because RT doesn't really have an independent editorial line. If you take, irrespective of what Margarita Simonian says. That has changed. I think Russia now realizes who its friends are and who its friends aren't. It's a delicate balancing game that India has to play. But look, we've balanced this very, very well. Even when Trump imposed sanctions on India, tariffs on India, not sanctions on India, the linkage to Russian oil was very, very tenuous. Remember that. That came much later. The initial threats of tariffs and things like that were purely about the trade imbalance. So even the Americans, the victory of Indian foreign policy here is that India's security relationship and foreign policy relationship with Russia has never been called into question, even by the Americans.
Right. Now, we've just got Sputnik putting this out, citing the Kremlin, saying Prime Minister Narendra Modi's decision to meet President Putin at the aircraft ramp was unexpected and that the Russian side had not been informed in advance. That's what Kremlin is saying. So this is clearly a surprise move, a gesture that's happened last minute. Traffic has been stopped outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. Let's go across to Siddhant. He should be, the cavalcade should be arriving or entering 7 Lok Kalyan Marg any moment now. Siddhant, again, Kremlin saying that this was not informed, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be coming to the tarmac. So this was not advance notice. So this has been taken, this decision has been taken at the nth moment. Is it part of, a few surprises that are in store? And given the amount of security and the kind of secrecy that's been kept over the entire itinerary of President Putin in his visit to Bharat?
Well, that's right, Anand. In fact, till today afternoon, in fact, my sources were also indicating that EM S. Jaishankar will be the minister in waiting for President Putin. But it was CNN News 18 which broke this story first, that Prime Minister Modi will be going to the airport to receive President Putin. In fact, Anand, right now we are at 7 LKM. The traffic on both sides of the road have been stopped, and we could expect the cavalcade to be entering 7 Lok Kalyan Marg any any moment from now, or rather the cavalcade has already entered, because we cannot see the cavalcade entering from the location where we are placed, stationed. But all we can tell our viewers is that the area has been cordoned off, the traffic has been stopped, and I could also see some of the vehicles coming to the front gate of 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. So both leaders are going to sit for the informal talks. It's only going to be Prime Minister Modi, President Putin, and yes, there you see, Anand, the cavalcade has arrived, and we can now officially say that the cavalcade of President Putin and Prime Minister Modi has reached 7 Lok Kalyan Marg after dropping the leaders inside. Yeah, and if I could request my camera person to pan and give shots to our viewers, the scene outside the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. In fact, we could see the cars.
Yeah, he needs to raise the camera up a little. He needs to lift it up a bit. Lift, and you need to move out of the frame. Move out of the frame, lift it up a bit, and that's when we can see what's behind. Yeah.
Yes, that's right, Anand. So, the cavalcades, few cars have come to this side, the front gate of the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, and we can officially confirm that President Putin and Prime Minister Modi...
Can you ask your VJ to raise his camera a bit, if you can lift the tripod up a bit, please? Yeah.
I would ask my VJ to raise his camera. There is very little space, Anand, from where we are reporting outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. So I really apologize that
no, this is better. This is better. It's just because of the leaves. It's better now. Yeah, you're live on. You're on live. Go ahead, please. Yeah, stay on these pictures. Yeah.
Yes, Anand. So we can say that both leaders have reached. In some time from now, the informal conversation will begin at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. And Anand, it will only be Prime Minister Modi and President Putin along with the interpreters, nobody else. So it is in reciprocity, because last time when Prime Minister Modi was in Moscow, President Putin hosted him at his mansion, and both leaders spoke for about 2 hours. So we could also be expecting that President Putin will be briefing Prime Minister Modi about his meeting with the Americans yesterday with
the Witkoff meeting.
Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff. Yes. So in all likelihood, President Putin will definitely be briefing Prime Minister Modi, will be discussing as far as Ukraine conflict is concerned. In fact, Prime Minister will also be sharing his perspective, because Prime Minister has...
We're going to pull away from you, because these are pictures to the right, viewers, which are coming from the tarmac. Those are pictures live right outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. The leaders are already inside, and the PMO will be releasing pictures from inside any moment now. It should be on the social media handles of the Prime Minister, or it will come on the national broadcaster Doordarshan any moment, and we'll cut to those pictures when it comes. Just quickly going across to Nikita Menkovich. And Nikita, this entire issue with Ukraine, is this weighing in on Russia? Are there entities who don't want this conflict to be resolved and for peace to or for there to be ceasefire? Can Bharat play a role here? How does Russia view this?
As I said before, the main problem is that Russian land is occupied by foreign forces. I mean NATO mercenaries, so-called Ukrainian army. Also, Ukrainian land is also under control of United States puppet government. Of course, the only possible solution of this conflict is NATO going back, leaving Russia and Ukraine alone. It is our leave or do it or die. It is our quit India campaign, which you did a long time ago to make your country free. The same situation is now. Ukrainian and Russian people don't want to be American or British slaves. We are doing our best. Of course, we would prefer a peaceful decision. We would prefer the stop of this conflict, NATO troops going away from our territory, and Ukrainian people will get a freedom to elect those future without Zelensky, without NATO, without American dictatorship. But as we see now, a lot of politicians at the West are not ready for such way finishing of the conflict. They continue producing weapons, money, and mercenaries for so-called Ukrainian army. to continue aggression against Russia and Ukrainian people. So, of course, we're doing our best in diplomacy, but we still have no choice but to fight at the battlefield for our freedom and for our future. It is the situation.
Well, Nikita Surya Jayanti had an interesting perspective where she said America has got a bit of a problem, especially the White House, because there are entities who do not want this war to end, who want the conflict to continue or the fight to continue. How would you read this before I bring in Ambassador Shashank? Yes. Is this the critical aspect? Can Bharat play a role where somewhere both sides agree that Ukraine will not join NATO? That's the first step for ceasefire. And then perhaps de-escalation. Surya.
Before I answer your question directly, I think I should just say that the magnitude of patently false gibberish that your guest from Moscow has just spewed is so astonishing that I don't even know where to start factually unpacking it. But the fact that he is spouting propaganda that disingenuous is itself an indication of the degree to which the ongoing issues caused by Russia in Ukraine are important to the dynamic that we're seeing here. I think one could overstate the degree to which Washington's interest in India and India's relationship with Russia has to do with Russia's ability to continue to prosecute its war in Ukraine. I think, as another one of your guests said a lot earlier, the justification of Indian oil purchases as somehow funding Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine came after and is not particularly convincing. So it is a complicated moment for the United States because the United States has argued a number of inconsistent and fairly incompatible priorities. On one hand, it is trying to force a profoundly disadvantageous so-called peace on Ukraine. On the other hand, it's slapping additional oil sanctions on Russia. It doesn't add up to a particularly meaningful path forward to a solution. And I think all of this matters because the situation that Russia has found itself in by virtue of its international aggression is adequately isolated and adequately economically crippling, that although Russia's economy has remarkably defied expectations of collapse, with the initial sanctions now going back almost 4 years, it is nonetheless in a very difficult position, and it really does need a lot of labor to come in. And so you speak about the Mobility Pact, for example. Russia has a massive demographic problem. It's lost over 1 million people on the front line and casualties of various kinds. There's been mass exodus by people trying to avoid the draft and trying to avoid the crush of sanctions. So Russia has a demographic and a labor problem. It really needs Indian workers. It also really needs India to continue buying Russian crude. Although Russian crude levels have not actually decreased, the export levels, the amount of money that Russia is getting has dropped 34% since the United States put tariffs on India and then since the October additional sanctions on Russian oil companies like Lukoil. And so it's becoming a more complicated economic relationship for India. I think the political relationship is something that India has managed quite well, considering that its priorities are not the priorities of the United States, but it does need to balance its relationships on both sides.
Yeah,
so the Indian strategic autonomy approach has been very wise.
Right. But Shashankji, we've got Sati Kazanova also with us, and Sati, I'll come across to you. After a quick word with Shashankji, there is a neutral perspective, or perhaps there is a different perspective to this entire, there is what Nikita would say and what Surya would agree or disagree. One aspect is the word Ukraine itself means borderlands. So clearly this was the erstwhile border area for the Russian territory. Vladimir Putin is born not so far away from where Volodymyr Zelensky is born. So there is a history there. The other thing is it's the NATO that's expanded eastward. And 20 years ago, this was flagged off by Putin, and this is on record that the NATO should not move eastwards towards Russia. That's one part. The other thing is the only warm water access are the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea for the Russians. There is no other warm water access. NATO moving into the Black Sea means the warm water access stops. So this is one part. The other part is the entire Donbas region, which is largely Russian-speaking, and Russia has alleged that the CIA was worked the machinations for the government overturn, compared to what the West would say that Russia was trying to supersede its own people and superimpose its authority over Ukraine. Now, how do we view this? And where is the solution? Because both sides have to agree on a solution. The nation that suffered the most amidst all of this is Ukraine. It's totally destroyed. Ukraine is the bread basket or the wheat basket to the world. It's also the fertilizer hub. There are a lot of contributions Ukraine made to the world.
I agree with you that Ukraine people have suffered the maximum. And that is because the NATO countries, they felt that they would be able to support Ukraine to the extent that Russia just collapses or Russia just gives in. And that was their initial expectation, which has not materialized. In fact, more and more American scholars are now talking about the Russians trying to go into not only Crimea, but also Odessa, and to gradually convert Ukraine into a landlocked state. So therefore, what is happening is in Ukraine is we have to keep in mind that something similar was also being tried by the NATO countries when they wanted Quad to become an Asian NATO, as Russia and China had started talking about that. Then India would have been like the Ukraine of Asia, where Taiwan and China would not have fought, but India would have fought on behalf of Taiwan, with the as we fought in First World War and Second World War and lost 70,000-80,000 people in both wars. So I think that is why Indian people are very reluctant, and they want peace to come into Ukraine. They want peace to come in Europe, because whenever there is conflict in Europe, it has led to problems in all over the world. So I think we have to be careful with that, that this time we are trying to bring about a balanced relationship of peace with China. And we are seeing, as Abhijit Iyer Mitra said, that Russia should not feel compelled to play the second fiddle to China. And then we have, of course, the global south. We have our friends in Brazil, South Africa, we have IPSA. So we hope that we would be able to put across the views of the global south more effectively in the BRICS forum and other forums which are there at the interregional levels.
Right, there's a lot to talk about, but there's also a dinner spread in a short while from now. So are they going to keep the official aspects on the side and also exchange some personal notes and share some non-work moments as two great leaders and of two big nations? That we have to wait and watch. I thank all our other guests, but I'm going to quickly go across to Satani Kazanova, who's with us. Sati, thank you very, very much. Namaste. How do you see...
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram. And how would you view President Putin's visit?
If you don't mind, I would not speak from a political point of view, as I'm not a politician, I'm a musician, and I'm just so happy that our cultures, our countries building their friendship and relationships stronger, deeper, and of course the cultural side is very fundamental for our countries, because India and Russia, we have way more common points than we could think, such as values, as a family, spirituality, and someone says that, you know, the Western world is very focused on artificial intellect, as long as India and Russia, they focus on the spiritual intellect. And I really like that expression and this idea. So I think that is the very important boundary between our countries. And if we will focus on that, I believe we could build beautiful relationship, because as I love India and I come so often to India, and now I'm even learning on the faculty of Indology. I'm learning Sanskrit and all the things.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
no,
not.
because what you just said is so rooted in Indian philosophy, Bharatiya Sanatan philosophy,
Yeah,
Hindu
exactly.
philosophy, if I may say. So, how did you get to know about this? What's your bond with Bharat? How did it happen?
All happened through my guru. His picture, by the way, behind, and my guru Paramahamsa Vishwananda. I met him 13 years ago, and since that moment, I started initiated, and he just gave me all this knowledge. And after all these years, I understood it more than just thing I like. This is the really root and sense of my life. So I consider myself as a Vaishnava. So it's just more than style of life. So that's why I decided to go to the University of the Friendship University to learn for Hindu Indology. And it's,
Are there many in Russia who are drawn towards Indology or Hindutva or Hinduness, the Vaishnava philosophy?
No, unfortunately, not many, because it's quite deep topic. You have to really dive. Western world, they're charmed by yoga, but it's such a small part of the great and deep philosophy. So, for example, now reading Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I understand it's so artificial how the understanding of Western world of yoga itself, even the meaning of the word, we don't know. I mean, in the Western world.
True. Let me also ask you, you said that we should call ourselves Bharat, not India. Why do you say
Definitely. Yes.
that? Why do you say that?
Because it brings back to your own root, to your own values and power.
I remember, so you believe that we should call ourselves Bharat in any language, and that's the better way to refer to ourselves.
Yes, I believe it will bring you back to that original source, to your power. Because originally, India was not called India. It happened through Arabic and British people because of geographical location. So those who live nearby or behind the river Hind, those were
Sindhu.
called Hindi, Sindhu,
Yeah.
Hindi, whatever.
Yeah, Al-Hind.
So, yeah, Al-Hind, that's how it happened. So it's not your original name. And I think it's time to come back. And it's a beautiful, soft revolution or evolution of your culture.
Well, Sati, if I may call you that, in
Yes.
2018, I believe Prime Minister Narendra Modi showed President Putin something, and
Yes.
that involved you. So I'm going to request you to sing that for us. Mahatma
was,
Gandhi's
my
favorite bhajan.
Yes, very short part of that. And that's also the favorite bhajan of my Gurudev, and that's how I even was familiar.
So will you sing that for us, please?
वैष्णव जन तो तेने काहिए जे पीड़ बराए जानी रे वैष्णव जन तो तेने काहिए जे पीड़ बराए जानी रे. I think that's enough.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, and we look forward to you joining us in our studio the next time you're in Delhi, next time you're in Bharat. Thank you so much for your time, Satani Kazanova. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Namaste.
Namaskaram.
Well, these are the pictures, viewers, of President Vladimir Putin arriving in Bharat just a short while ago. He was given a warm welcome, an embrace of welcome from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and Kremlin says they did not know. President Putin was made aware only after the flying Kremlin touched down at the Palam Air Base, and now these two leaders are already at 7 Lok Kalyan Mark. They traveled together in the vehicle that was supposed to ferry only the Russian president, but both of them traveled together. So a repeat of the Tianjin moment again. And now what's going to be on the conversation, not just over dinner, but perhaps what's been spoken in those first 15 minutes, that will also have huge import. Zaka Jacob takes it forward. Welcome to our continuing coverage here on CNN News 18. What a moment this is. The Prime Minister a short while ago arriving at the Palam airport to receive his friend Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, both of them riding in the same car, and they've now reached the Prime Minister's residence at 7 LKM, where there will be a private dinner that the Prime Minister will be hosting for the Russian president. And more importantly, there will be, of course, the restricted meetings that will happen as well. So after which the president will go to the ITC Moria where he's staying, and then tomorrow is the business end of his visit. Let's just bring you up to speed with the images that we've seen already. Just about 30 minutes or so after President Putin touched down, Prime Minister broke protocol, went to the Palam airport to receive his friend. You can see him there at the tarmac, at the red carpet, welcoming President Putin. The Kremlin says they had no idea that Prime Minister Modi was coming to receive President Putin. Both of them, it's a warm hug, a warm embrace, and then they walk down that red carpet, and both men then, of course, share the same car. It is an Indian car. It is part of the security protocol team for the Prime Minister. Both of them took a moment to try and savor the Indian cultural performance. There was a troupe of women dancers performing the Bharatanatyam, so that happened. They took a few moments to savor that in, and then thereafter, both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin walk up to this car, this security cavalcade car that's part of the Prime Minister's security protocol. Both of them ride in that same car and head towards 7 LKM, the Prime Minister's residence, where, of course, the Prime Minister is hosting the Russian president, the visiting head of state, in a private dinner followed by restricted talks. And then President Putin leaves for the ITC Moria, where he's staying at the presidential suite for the next 24 hours. So these pictures from the Palam airport, and in a few moments we will get the pictures from 7 LKM as well, where the Prime Minister is hosting the visiting dignitary, the visiting head of state, the president of Russia. Clearly, this is a big moment as far as both India and Russia are concerned, because it comes at a moment of extreme geopolitical flux, at a time of geopolitical rebalancing, if you will, as far as both India and Russia are concerned. The Trump tariffs on India for importing Russian oil have really upended the relationship between India and the United States. It's also upended India's traditional relationship with Russia. Why Russia and India click? I think that's an important one to look at, because Russia supported India all through the Cold War, particularly in the 1971 war, in the liberation of Bangladesh. Kashmir vetoes. Every time Kashmir has come up at the United Nations Security Council, it has always been Russia that has backed India. There are defense routes. Remember, more than 50% of India's defense inventory, even today, even after diversification, even after Atmanirbharta, more than 50% of India's defense inventory is Russian origin, whether it's your tanks, your fighter jets, your missile defense systems. There's also old civilizational ties. Both the countries have had independent worldviews. India prides itself for its strategic autonomy, and Russia, of course, is looking at a non-American-led world order. Both sides have also held long memories of Western pressure, Western sanctions, Western hegemony. The last time, in fact, the first time President Putin was here and they started the annual summits, India was still under sanctions, under the nuclear test sanctions imposed by the United States. Now Russia is under sanctions, and also India is facing the tariffs. Discounted Russian oil, that has been a critical aspect of this relationship in the last 3 years since the Ukraine war began. Russia is India's number one energy supplier, number one oil supplier, and that is a factor. India is also a major ally for Russia beyond Beijing. Remember, President Putin said this, his press secretary said this. They want to have the same no limits partnership that they have with China. They want to have the same thing with India. Are there limits, though, to this Russia, India, China trilateral, as it were? We will wait and try and see what will happen over the next 24 hours to try and assess whether or not that's possible. But I want to open this up to our guests. What can we expect over the next day, the next 30 hours or so? Vivek Kajju is former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, will be joined in a moment by Mukesh Aghi of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Sadaran Dhume from the American Enterprise Institute will also be joining us, and Tatiana Kukureva is a senior Russian journalist who will be joining us from Moscow. But let me start with you, Ambassador Kajju. like I said, this is a time of delicate strategic balancing that's going on. There is this great power competition between America, Russia, there's China as a rising power. How does India maintain this balance between Russia and America? Let's start there.
To be maintained between India and China. Russia is no longer the power that it was during the era of the Soviet Union. Let's be clear on that. We have an intense relationship with Russia, which we need to protect. That relationship is in the civil nuclear area, in space, in defense supplies. But beyond that, Russia is a power that has severe limitations, and that those limitations have increased because of its involvement in the Ukraine war. That war has shown both Russia's advantages, but equally its limitations. So we've got to be conscious of this.
Okay.
It is a time of balancing, and why is this balancing needed? This balancing is needed because this year has not been a particularly good year for the India-US relationship.
Correct.
I don't need to go into details. Please recall that it was in February of this year that Prime Minister Modi was one of the first foreign leaders to meet with President Trump. And there was great expectation in Delhi that the India-US relationship will move ahead rapidly on an upward trajectory. That has not happened. So, therefore, India has had to recalibrate its diplomacy, its foreign policy to a large extent. And what we are seeing today is a product of that recalibration. So, my last point, Zaka, is so the days when Mr. Modi sought to lecture President Putin, if you recollect, that was in September of 2022 on the margins of the SCO summit when he said publicly that this is not a time for war.
Okay.
I think that era has gone, and India has had to, will have to play a far more delicate game, diplomatic game. But let us also be clear on one point.
Sir, just 1 second, because we have a live link with the CNN reporter Will Ripley, who is in Delhi and will be covering this visit of President Putin over the next day or so. Will, thank you very much for joining us here on News 18. A lot is on the agenda for both President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. There's trade, defense deals, mobility agreements that people are talking about. What, at the end of the day, do you reckon would be the tangible results that we can expect at the end of the day of negotiations tomorrow?
Well, we already know that the two of them are going to be inking a lot of deals, trying to find ways to bolster the economic partnership, the long-standing friendship between India and Russia. But I think what's perhaps even more important than that for both of these men, for Modi and for Putin, is the optics of this. The fact that we saw them once again just moments ago sitting in a limousine together, much like they did several months ago after the SCO summit in China, where they sat and talked privately for nearly an hour in Putin's armored limousine. We saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi waiting on the tarmac to greet Vladimir Putin as he walked off the plane. They are likely doing this, projecting this close relationship, knowing that there's one person in particular glued to the television set watching this very closely. And of course, you and I both know who that is. That's President Donald Trump at the White House. This is coming at a very critical time where relations between Delhi and New Delhi and Washington are arguably at some of the lowest levels in years. At the same time, Russia and the U.S. are trying to figure out a way to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. And for Vladimir Putin to be able to come here and stand next to the leader of the world's largest democracy, one of the most powerful leaders in the world, and to stand shoulder to shoulder and project such warmth and friendship, it's a message to Donald Trump, for both Modi and Putin, that they have options no matter what happens with the U.S.
How do you think Washington, in particular the Trump administration, how do you think they're going to view this? The last time, like you said, when they rode together at the SCO summit, I think Trump said something on social media to the effect that I think we've lost India to deep, dark China and Russia. How do you think he's going to view it this time around?
Well, I think it's, of course, I don't know President Trump personally, but from what we see publicly and what he says, he might get pretty jealous to see the two of them so close and chatting so in such a friendly way. President Trump loves himself to sit in the limousine and chat with Prime Minister Modi and to sit with Vladimir Putin. He likes to be in the room when these conversations are happening. And so the fact that he is kind of on the outside looking into this, that's not a great position for him to be in because he needs things from both Modi and Putin. He wants to end very badly the war in Ukraine. The Russians feel that, frankly, they have a lot more leverage in the situation, which leaves the United States to basically do the easier thing and to pressure the Ukrainians to threaten weapons shipments and intelligence sharing and that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot of pressure that the U.S. can put on Russia right now because the sanctions aren't really working that much. Putin's kind of rejiggered his economy to make it an economy that is supported by this war effort. So the Russians can keep waging war as long as they feel they need to until they get things like the concessions, the land concessions of the Donbass region. And so for President Trump to be watching that and to know that he doesn't have a whole lot of economic leverage either because of the fact that India is purchasing so much affordable Russian oil, the economic relationship, the military technology, the fighter jet, information sharing that could be negotiated and signed here in the coming hours. All of it certainly leaves President Trump sitting in the White House wondering what he's going to need to do to get himself in the position that he likes, which is a more powerful position than perhaps the United States is sitting in right now.
Okay, Will Ripley, many thanks for joining us live covering the visit of President Putin to Delhi. Of course, both of them have now arrived at the Prime Minister's residence where a private dinner is being hosted by the Prime Minister for the visiting President. Let me also go across and open this up to our panelists. Mukesh Aghi from US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. He's joining us. Tatiana Kukreva is a senior Russian journalist. She's joining us as well and we'll be joined in a moment by Suzanne Dhume from the American Enterprise Institute. Mr. Aghi, let me start with you. I mean, clearly the backdrop to this entire visit, some would say, the elephant in the room when President Putin and Prime Minister Modi speak will be President Donald Trump. And much of the conversation, I guess, would revolve around India's import of Russian oil, the 50% tariffs that the US has imposed on India. How does India play this delicate balancing act? All right, we're just getting the latest shots from 7 LKM, where both leaders have arrived just moments ago. You can see both of them walk down that red carpet. You've got the Russian flag on the one side, the Indian flag on the other side, and both of them walking in to 7 LKM, which is lit up in the colors of the tricolor and the three colors of the Russian flag, the red, white and blue of the Russian flag and the saffron, white and green of the Indian flag. Both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin getting off that luxury vehicle, walking down the red carpet and going in to 7 LKM, where the Prime Minister is hosting a private dinner for the visiting President of Russia, President Vladimir Putin. As we stay on those pictures, I want to bring in Mukesh Aghi on this note. How will this be viewed in the White House by President Trump? And again, how does India strategically balance its interests at the same time not having to antagonize President Trump?
Well, Zaka, first is when you look at the current situation between India and the US, it is driven more by the US in the current scenario. The second part is the relationship is not just about tariff between the two countries. I think relationship is much broader and deeper. So I think the tariff issue, if you just park aside, we're seeing the trade still moving forward. The students are still coming in. The technology transfer is happening. So that's so I would like to say that please let's not focus just on tariff. The relationship is much, much broader. How is this being viewed? I think you have a prime minister who has basically managed this very, very carefully because you have a country, Russia, which has been with India for many, many years and supported India in every aspect. But at the same time, it's a country which is diminishing power and economy is in a challenging position, whereas India's largest trading partner is the United States. If you look at the majority of the capital is coming from the US companies. When you look at in the aspect of technology transfer, it's coming more from the US. When you look at the global capability centers in India, almost 2,000, 60% are US and creating a lot of innovation in every aspect. So the relationship with the US is still very important, very critical, and it will keep on moving forward. I think the shock of the 50% tariff is gone. India has managed that very well. It has been able to divert a lot of the exports from US to other countries. So I think that leverage which US had has kind of dwindled down substantially. So I would say that while Russian president was coming in, we saw a couple of orders on defense deal with the US announced. That's sending a message to the US also saying that the relationship is very important. We will maintain our relationship with our friends, be it China, be it Russia, or be it European Union. So I think from every aspect, India is playing a very strong role as trying to manage a multilateral relationship between different countries.
I also want to go across to Tatiana, and both Mr. Aghi and Ambassador Kaju before him, one running theme had been, look, Russia is not the power that it used to be. Yes, India has a long-standing relationship with Russia, even with the Soviet Union, on the defense front, on other fronts, but it is a diminishing power. It is a declining power. How do you see that?
Well, I don't quite agree with that, understandably. If anything, our economy has shown its incredible resilience because, for almost 4 years now, I've heard this. We've heard this every year saying, okay, your economy is going to collapse. Our economy has actually not just not collapsed, like some of the European countries who are experiencing huge economic troubles due to the sanctions that were originally imposed on Russia. So the fact that we've managed to regroup, restructure the economy shows that Russia is not only a huge power that needs to be taken seriously, because again, we can't just stick to the same narrative of, oh, look, well, Russia's under sanctions, it's struggling, and it's not going to be the same power it used to be. Yes, of course, the Soviet Union was quite a different story. But look at, and first of all, we need to look at what is on the table for this visit. Russia has been involved, for instance, in the nuclear industry with India since 2002, if I'm not mistaken. And right now, Russia is at the forefront of technology when it comes to small modular reactors. This is not going to change. Our defense production is obviously a hugely successful field. And as I think I've already said today, the advantage of Russian defense technology is that it is actually tested in operational capacity. So there are a lot of things that can be discussed. There's a lot of diversification to this relationship that is on the table during this visit. And I believe that, the whole idea of Russia being the underdog here is not at all correct, and it shouldn't.
Okay.
So we should look at things from a different perspective.
So
really.
I think Tatiana is right. Tomorrow when the leaders discuss, when they get to the business end of the business day, really, they will be talking about diversification of this relationship. I believe there's something about labor mobility that they will announce tomorrow. There's going to be something about import of fertilizers from Russia. So they're trying to diversify the breadth of this relationship. Sadanand Dhume, senior fellow with the American Enterprise Institute, is also joining us. Sadanand, so, just before you joined, I was making this point both to Mr. Aghi and to Ambassador Kaju that, look, if Trump thought that he could pressurize India with the oil tariffs and get India to put pressure on Mr. Putin to stop the war, that hasn't happened. And if his view was that India will sort of fold and stop importing Russian oil, that hasn't happened either. So how is this visit being viewed in Washington, and this whole strategy of putting those oil tariffs on India, both in terms of what impact it would have on Russia and what impact it would have on India, doesn't seem to have played out, at least the way Mr. Trump thought it would?
Thank you, Zaka. I'm not, my own view, I spent some time pondering this. It's not clear to me how linked those two things were in Mr. Trump's mind. Because on the one hand, you have the fact that he imposed this 25% extra tariff on India. But in terms of US-Russia policy, it seems to kind of blow one way and then the other way. So on the one hand, you have had this sort of attempt to pressure Russia, ironically through India as opposed to sort of directly. But on the other hand, if you look at U.S. policy towards Russia, I think the U.S. Appears to be far more eager to beat out some kind of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. We've had multiple meetings between Special Envoy Witkoff and President Putin, for example. And so I'm not sure if this was all sort of part of this finely coordinated, finely tuned issue. I think what's happened on the tariffs, at least in part, is that that's just Trump's style of negotiating. It tends to be punitive. He tends to try to raise the stakes. And I think he saw a lever on India on the trade stuff, which was related to Russia, which was sort of, maybe connected somewhat to his larger plans in Russia. But I think the trade dispute is at least in my mind, it's a separate strand of policy here.
Ambassador Kaju, just in terms of, clearly Trump wants to end this war. And even earlier this week, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were in Russia. Mr. Putin doesn't seem to be in any mind to end this war. He wants to win this war on the battlefield, and he thinks that he's winning the war on the battlefield. But the problem is also those oil tariffs are not going to go away till this war ends. So whether India likes it or not, India has skin in this game. So how does India manage it then, Ambassador?
Look, India has wanted the war to end no sooner had it begun. There's no doubt about it. India wants this war to end. I think it's in India's interest that this war ends quickly. But anyone in Delhi who believes that India has leverage over Russia and can contribute to ending this war would be in cuckoo land. I don't think we really have any leverage over Russia on this. This is a European matter for Russia. It's a Western matter. And the Russians have gained substantially on the battlefield. Trump understands that. The Europeans are still hung up on sovereignty issues. And Putin has an advantage here. He can wait it out for quite some time. I think his economy has held. So that is one aspect. The second is that I do not believe that the tariffs have not hurt us. The tariffs have been in labor-intensive industries. There have been layoffs. And while we have tried to look for other markets, there are areas like textiles, like carpets, etc., where there is no substitute for the American market. So the tariffs have hurt. And Modi would like the tariffs to become more reasonable. Certainly, he would like the 25% based on Russian oil exports, that portion of the tariffs to be history, but that's not happening.
Yeah.
So I think the signal that Mr. Modi is sending to Washington, particularly to Mr. Trump, is that India has alternatives, that India can play the grand strategy game and will not be pressurized by the Americans.
Okay.
The fact is that what is the ambit of play that we have here? On that, we can have a discussion till the cows come home and not arrive at a definite consensus.
Okay.
But my last point, we are hurting. On that, let there be no doubt. Despite all the signaling that is being sent to Washington, we are hurting because of tariffs.
So, Mr. Aghi, the problem here is that Trump has undertaken a strategy. I'm not sure the results are paying off. And two, by taking the actions he has taken, he's only pushing India further and further into Russia's embrace. In fact, just before he arrived here, President Putin and his press secretary basically said that we want to have the same kind of relationship with India that we have with China. Now, you could argue that it's not possible because of all kinds of reasons, but at least in the Russian thinking, in the Russian point of view, they want to have the same relationship, the same no limits partnership that they have with Beijing. They want to extend that to India as well. And some would say, why shouldn't India take that hand of friendship? Because after all, Trump is pushing us in that direction.
Well, I would not basically measure the relationship India has with the US vis-a-vis Russia or China, because the relationship is much broader, much deeper. You have around 5+ billion Indian Americans who basically are quite engaged in the economic, social environment, technology environment, academia, and they work very closely either from emotional attachment or economic attachment with India. When you look at the corporate America, and I've talked to roughly 80 plus global CEOs in the last 30 days, not a single one has said that they will move the investment out of India, or they will move their supply chain out of India, or they will shorten their investment in their global capability centers. So I think you have to understand the relationship between the United States and India is very, very different than with Russia or with China. I mean, so with Russia, it's more on a commodity base. You know, you're basically getting oil or you're getting other commodities itself. As far as trade goes, I mean, India's export to Russia is less than $5 billion. Whereas with the US and India is over $200 billion two-way trade itself. So I think the relationship is very, very different, very solid. Yes, tariffs are hurting, but I think the relationship is just not just based on tariff. And I think last quarter GDP results showed tariff or no tariff, India's economy grew by 8.2%.
Tatiana, you know, one of the points that a lot of guests have made, and I think what Mr. Aghi was also trying to allude to, is that the relationship between India and Russia basically has two legs. One is the defense relationship, which is an old one. I mean, even today, despite diversification, despite, you know, Atmanirbharta or self-reliance for defense manufacturing, more than 50% of India's weapons inventory has a Russian origin. So that's a long-standing one. And the other leg now, particularly since this war began, is on the energy side, with India importing a lot of Russian oil. But beyond that, you know, whether it is people-to-people contact, and I was looking at it, there are 70,000 Indians who are living and working in Russia right now. There are 5 million Indian Americans. The breadth of this relationship is very limited. It's very thin.
Well, this is exactly what is being looked at in terms of diversification, including during this visit. You know that the State Duma has just ratified the agreement that basically lays the foundation for many things, a legal foundation for including the labor, logistics, but not limited to that. And you know, however, it doesn't. However small it feels, but like for instance, in central Moscow, where I'm right now, it feels like we've had a lot more tourism from India. There is this connection between the people of Russia and India that has been there for decades. I mean, there is a cultural connection. I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Adil Hussein this year and in Moscow, and we spoke of Russian literature and the influence it's had on Indian cinema to begin with. But there's a huge history between our two nations. So to diminish it all to the level of the relationship being stood on, as you say, on two legs of defense exports and energy trade, also even diminishing that to the fact that India literally saved the economies of European nations, even of the US to some extent, by continuing to buy Russian oil and by stopping the oil prices from rocketing sky high back in 2022. It is a little bit too black and white to my taste.
Okay.
Even, yeah.
So Sadanand, you know, the strategic logic in the last 25 years, which underpinned the India-US relationship was, you know, if there's one country that can challenge US primacy, it is China. Somehow Trump seems to have, you know, thrown that logic out the window. He's very keen to cut a deal with Xi Jinping. They even had a phone call, I think, a few days ago when this whole tensions between China and Japan were ratcheting up over Taiwan. He seems keen that he doesn't want to sort of intrude in what he sees as Beijing's sphere of influence or Xi Jinping's sphere of influence. As far as India is concerned, we've had our own history with China, but relations seem to be on the mend. And now Russia is basically saying that we want to have the same relationship with India that we have with China. And there are also concerns that because of the war, effectively one of the consequences of this war has been that Russia has been pushed further and further into Beijing's embrace. That's something that the Russians are also concerned about, and certainly it's something that concerns folks here in New Delhi.
See, Zach, the way I see it, like even if you sort of, for a moment take I will come to the US part of your question, but even if you take the US out of the equation for a second and pretend that we were having this conversation, let's say in April this year, when US-India relations looked really strong, looked to be on an upswing, Vice President J.D. Vance was in New Delhi and so on, right? Even at that moment, if we'd had a discussion about the India-Russia relationship, I agree with Tatiana that there's great sentiment. There's a certain amount of, there are cultural links, certainly going back to the, to the Soviet era where Moscow was quite, sophisticated in terms of how it reached out to India and Indian elites and so on. So there's a sentimental element that's certainly there. But if you sort of go beyond that, right? The energy spike only dates to 2022. Before 2022, India had, the amount of energy India imported from Russia was vanishingly small. It was just less than a percent. And then you have the arms industry, which has been very important, as you pointed out. 50% still matters. But again, there, if you look at the CIPRI data, it has come down dramatically, right? India has gone from basically being, having roughly 70% of Indian arms imports being of Russian origin to the last 5-year period I looked at, it was down to 35%. Still number one, but to go from 70% to 35% is a very dramatic decline. So what we had until this recent kerfuffle with the US was a strong relationship. Nobody ever thought that India was going to cut its ties with Russia. India has a strong independent relationship with Russia that goes back for decades. It's been mutually reinforced. But the larger strategic dilemma remains, which is that if you look at Eurasia, the economic map of Eurasia has changed very dramatically over the last 25 years. And China has been the big gainer. India has been the second big gainer. And Russia, though it may not be collapsing, is really not in the picture. And so what India finds itself is that it has a China problem with Russia, whether it likes it or not. Now, ideally, from an Indian perspective, the US would be engaged in great power competition. It would view China as its major adversary or rival, and that would continue to be something that drives US-India relations closer.
Okay.
We have an idiosyncratic president in the White House right now who appears to have abandoned that, and that has created all kinds of chaos in the US-India relationship. But India's questions about the Russia-China relationship and Russia-China closeness and Russia dependency on China, those predate this current kerfuffle with India, and those aren't going away because they're based on very strong numbers. The fact is that the Chinese economy is vastly larger than the Russian economy. And the fact is that since 2022, Russia has become much more dependent on China. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying this is just a reality. Mm-hmm. And this raises questions for India. It raises questions for Indian defense planners. How much could it rely on Russia in a crunch?
All right, just one final word. I'm really out of time, Ambassador Kachu. You are putting a hand up, so just one sentence, please. What is it?
Just one sentence,
yeah, please,
Raka.
please.
I think there is a personal angle, and we know that these great leaders today, President Trump, Prime Minister Modi, President Putin, and Xi Jinping, lay a great deal of emphasis on personal chemistry. I think Trump's actions have deeply embarrassed Prime Minister Modi. And what we are seeing today, which is a good thing for the India-Russia relationship, I'm all in favor of the strengthening of this relationship. But let us not forget that there are personal signals being sent out by Mr. Modi to President Trump.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Ambassador Kaju, Susanna Dhume, and Mr. Mukesh Aghi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on this special coverage. But what's really at stake as far as the India-Russia relationship is concerned, I do a little deep dive into what to expect over the next 2 days. President Vladimir Putin of Russia arrived in New Delhi Thursday for the annual India-Russia summit, which marks Russia's long-standing partnership with India. President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are expected to discuss a wide range of issues from defense to energy to talent mobility. As many as 10 agreements between the two governments are expected to be announced during the visit. Putin is traveling with 75 Russian CEOs, the largest delegation that he's carried to India in the last 20 years. But looming over the bilateral discussions between Putin and Modi will be a third figure, a man who's been testing the limits of this partnership, US President Donald Trump. The timing is particularly sensitive for India, which has been searching for ways to resolve its tariff situation with Trump, particularly the oil tariffs. Trump has accused India of financing Russia's war on Ukraine by buying Russian oil. He has singled India out and imposed 25% oil tariffs on India, which is the only country to face these tariffs, even though China imports much more Russian oil than India does. Last month, India's biggest oil companies, both public and private, said that they would stop buying Russian crude after US sanctions on Russian oil giants Rosneft and Goyal, which are the two biggest Russian energy companies. The bilateral summit signals to the world that both India and Russia are committed to this relationship that dates back to the Soviet Union. This is the 23rd version of the annual summit, which first began in the year 2000 when Vladimir Putin first became president. For both Putin and Modi, this is an opportunity to show to the world, and in particular to Donald Trump, that they have friends and partners beyond America.
Мы нацелены вывести сотрудничество с Китайской Народной Республикой и с Республикой Индия на качественно новый уровень с усилением его технологической составляющей. На это нацелено множество совместных проектов в энергетике, в промышленности, космосе, сельском хозяйстве и так далее. По вопросам экономической повестки у нас выстроен содержательный диалог с председателем Китайской Народной Республики господином Си Цзиньпинем. Также подробно будем обсуждать эти темы в ходе предстоящего визита в Индию с премьер-министром господином Нарендрой Моди, включая увеличение импорта индийских товаров на наш рынок.
But Prime Minister Modi, who shares a warm personal bond with Vladimir